Oh.
Okay. Sorry about the no sound. Can you hear me now? Give me a thumbs up. Hopefully you can hear me now. I think you can. I'm hoping so. How about you, Deborah?
Yeah, okay, can you, I'm on.
Still no sound. I'm totally off. Hey, that's my fault. Okay, how about now? There we go. Thanks so much. Oh, it's a rookie mistake, you know, and we've been at this for a long time now, so you'd think I would have gotten that down. So my mic is on, and everyone is saying that it's good. So what I was saying, that you couldn't hear me, I just had my mouse going blah, 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 was that Deborah Jones is actually in the studio with me today, although we are social distancing. She's across the room, so we're not going to be in the same camera. We're just trying to stay healthy and safe. But I'm so excited to have her here. And she's going to share her expertise on stabilizer. You know, she has a background in both commercial embroidery and home embroidery. So if you have a question about stabilizer, she's the person to ask. And, you know, sometimes we look at that, all that white stuff in our sewing room, and we wonder, which one do I use for which product and which project and when? And Deborah's going to share her expertise and tell us. So welcome, Deborah, again.
Well, thank you. It's so great to be back here in the studio. And I look forward to talking about one of my favorite subjects, stabilizers.
Absolutely. So you have you know, you've started embroidering. Let me get us both back up there. When you were how old, Deborah?
Well, I started going to my father's embroidery shop when I was very young. Well, it was a tailor shop. We did embroidery. And when I was about 12, we got automated machines. So
wow.
I've been involved with manual and automated machine embroidery since about 12 years old.
Wow, that's wonderful. So that was really just like, you know, 15 years ago, right? Yeah. No big deal. We're not going to go into those details.
Yeah, I tend to say over 40 years and leave it at that.
Okay. So they're saying your mic is faint, so maybe just try to throw your voice a little. Okay. So, yeah, I know she does. Deborah talks really loud, but
I hope it's not just yours picking. Let's see. No, it's got bars.
Yep, got bars. I think we're both doing well. So, all right. So, Deborah, what are you going to share today? You have a PowerPoint presentation, so she's going to walk us through some of that, and then she's got some really great samples that and examples of, you know, when to use and what's the difference and so forth. So, shall we go ahead and get started with that?
Sure, let's do
all right.
first.
And there we go.
Eileen's going to drive my PowerPoint, so we're doing it because of the social distancing. So I think she will be able to follow my narration.
She's going to try. There we go.
If I have to, I'll
oh my gosh, I just lost everything.
But I think it'll go pretty smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. So, what white stuff do you need?
You know, because it all kind of looks the same in your drawer, doesn't it?
Yes.
So, you know, back when Eileen alluded to how long I've been doing this, and back when I was doing this a long time ago, for tearaway, we literally used industrial paper towels, and for cutaway, we used dressmaker interfacing. So we've come a long way in the variety that's available to us.
That's great.
So most stabilizers are actually just made out of polyester fibers, cellulose, and binding agents. And, you know, cellulose is just what paper's made out of. So it's polyester fiber and cellulose. And, you know, you may have been taught when you were learning to embroider to double up on your stabilizer and put it at opposing angles like is shown here. And that's really not, that's because in the early days, stabilizers had a lot of stretch and they were not very uniform. And so today, stabilizers, especially those that are made by the wet blade method, are a lot more uniform.
Okay. We kind of have some issues with sound, Deborah. They say you're really low, so I'm trying to find out why.
Well, I moved my microphone. During this, let me just hold it. Is that better? Does it help if I hold it right in front of my mouth? Is that any louder?
Let's see what they say. Let's see. Is that better? Sounds like a third person is making sounds with paper. That's not good. We could possibly have a wrong computer
Channel?
on. Yeah. So, or let's just switch mics for right now.
All right. So hopefully this is better. Okay. Anybody hear me better now? So the reason for the doubling up was that the uniformity wasn't good, coverage of fibers, as well as there was a lot of stretch in the early stabilizers. Not better?
Not really. Not better. Gee, that's just terrible. That is horrible. Okay.
Well, I don't know how to help that.
Yeah,
but
well,
I think especially since we changed mine.
yes, that doesn't really make sense. So,
So should I come over where you
why
are?
don't you come over where you, yes, where I am, and I'll go over there.
Okay.
You just come stand in here.
Okay, so now does that help? Does anybody? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, you can hear if it sounds hollow. I think it must be the area. Now it works. Okay.
Okay, now it works. All right, good. Well, that's great. So oh, I guess this mouse isn't advancing, right? So I'm trying to advance my PowerPoint. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we are having some technical difficulties here, and so if you would just bear with us for a minute while we get, I don't know why we have all these open. Let's just share the screen again. We'll get her PowerPoint back up, and it might be best if we actually work on the samples, the stitch outs.
Yeah, well, let's see if it advances.
Okay, so here you want to be here now, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Okay, yay.
It's not in the stream. Okay,
Oh.
it's not in. Well, you were both waiting for. Yeah, we are. I don't know what we're waiting for. We're kind of standing here praying. So, and that's not working. So let's see. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we'll share again. See if we can't make this happen. Deborah, tell us, what is stabilizer made out of?
So stabilizer is made out of a mixture of polyester fibers and cellulose, and actually the stabilizers that are the best have a little bit of silicone mixed in so that it lubricates your needle with every needle penetration, which is really a good thing because that's going to reduce the friction and reduce your thread breaks, of course, you know. So that's going to be in the highest quality stabilizers. And, you know, we also have binding agents in there, but your difference between your cutaways and your tearaways is that a tearaway has mostly cellulose, which is what paper's made out of. And a cutaway has mostly more polyester fibers. And there's a lot of other factors like the length of the fibers and so forth. But in this slide, I want you to look at the difference in fiber coverage between a dry laid stabilizer, also called a random saturate, and the wet laid. Look at the even distribution of the fibers in the wet laid stabilizer. That's why you don't need to double up. You can easily see why you needed to double up with the dry laid. So, no, it's not advancing.
It's not advancing.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, isn't this fun, Deborah? Aren't you glad you came in? Deborah hasn't been in the office in weeks. And I wonder if she'll ever come back. Let's see. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, we could go to the live samples and
Okay.
maybe that would just be the ticket.
Right.
So I'm going to go over to the live camera.
And we'll see if you can hear. We're hoping you can hear her.
Okay, so we'll get switched over to this camera and I'll tell you about this beautiful, oh, it says your mic is muted. Is
Well,
it you?
no,
Oh,
that's muted.
okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so you see this beautiful flip block here that Eileen made, and the product that allowed her to make this sample is called Fuse and Stick. And it's a product that you fuse to the back of your fabric. So this has been fused to the back of her material, and on the front of the fabric you can see these stitching lines of the element that's in her applique. And if we flip back, you can see this is where she applied these narrow pieces as her applique. So this stitching line is actually her cutting line. So she can cut each of these out to be her applique. And I'm going to show you why that's why the fuse and stick is important in a minute. But here's a clever idea she had. She fused her fuse and stick to each piece of this pink fabric and then stitched on top of it and cut them all at once. So instead of stitching multiples like she did here, which takes more fabric, she used small, even scraps of fabric could be used and layer them and then cut them all at once. Wow, what a
Time-saving idea. And so the thing you want to do after you've stitched your pieces is you want to slit with your scissors or a X-Acto knife or some other sharp tool, slit the back and expose this sticky. And you can see it clings to my finger, so it is definitely sticky. And that's what you use to apply it to your fabric. So here's where she applied the green element. So you can see you can just peel away that backing and apply it right on top of that stitching line. And then you can do your satin stitches. So it's a pretty slick product. I think that's great. So good ideas for using the fuse and stick product. And of course, this is the
Print and stick.
print stick target paper, which is awesome because she used it after she got her appliques finished. She was able to print her quilting designs right on top of and place them right on top of her elements that are already on the block. I think that's really brilliant. So that is a neat product too. So that is the fuse and stick product. Now, another interesting, hey Eileen,
Yeah.
is this?
Oh.
I don't know if it's on. Oh, it's on now. Okay, never mind. Oh, okay, so this is another neat product, which actually it's a few products. We've got the water-soluble topping that was used on top, and I'm going to show you a neat trick for removing And so in a minute, but this has been applied to the peel and stick product. And the peel and stick is something that's great for a small item like this that you can't get in the hoop. You can just stick it right down. Another item that I use it for is things like hair ribbons. It is a tearaway product, and it is good for all kinds of purposes. And of course, when you use this water-soluble topping, there's a couple of products that look similar to it, but that are not water-soluble. For example, this clear film is a heat-soluble film, and we'll talk more about it in a minute. And we also have the water-soluble mesh. And this is what you would use as a base for making lace or in the hoop products. It dissolves very, very easily, and using warm water doesn't hurt, but it's not required. So this is water-soluble mesh. This is the water-soluble topping. So the peel and stick is easy to remove the item from it because it is a tearaway. So you want to do it gently and just make as small a hole as possible. And then you can just patch that hole using a spare piece, like from this edge. If I were to just cut this away, I could actually use it to patch the reverse side. So I could take that small little margin piece, apply it to the back, and I don't have to re-hoop a new piece. So that's a real money saver and stabilizer saver there. So that will really work well. Now, you may have had issues in the past when you use water-soluble topping, getting all the little pieces out. So once you tear it away, there's a couple of things you can do. One thing that I do is I mix 1 part fabric softener with 12 parts water and spray it, and that dissolves it pretty readily. But another thing you can do, this is one of my favorite methods, and that is simply to put a moist paper towel over the top and kind of blot it, and then just iron right over that paper towel and kind of iron it dry, okay? Iron it until it's dry. And when you peel it away, look at that, it's magic. All of the water soluble clings to that paper towel. Look at that, how there's nothing left inside those little letters. And if there does happen to be a little tiny bit, just repeat the process. But it's really like magic. And just focus on those areas where you may see a little bit all gone. So that is a great tip for anything that's not too heat sensitive to use that method with. So great tip. And of course, one of my favorite stabilizers that, as I just showed you a minute ago, looks similar to the water soluble is the heat soluble. Now, I love to do handkerchiefs. I do wedding handkerchiefs. I do scriptures like. Not really. You know, of course, I think that these stitches still look pretty great. And of course, when I'm doing the embroidery with the topping underneath, it's still under there, right? It's just missing from the hole. So you still have the lift that the water soluble is giving those stitches because it's still under them. It's just missing from the holes. So I think you'll find it doesn't flatten it to the degree you'd be unhappy with your embroidery appearance. Now, the heat. Sure.
They can't hear, but Misha wanted to know, can you use the mesh as a topper in a pinch?
Well, Misha wants to know if you could use the mesh as a topper in a pinch. On certain fabrics, it would probably be fine, Misha. And if you did have any challenge getting it removed completely, certainly using the warmer water, the better. I would suggest in that instance, that would be a good thing to do. I don't recommend it as a matter of course, but if you needed to use it, I would be comfortable with it, because actually it dissolves almost as readily as a heavy water soluble film. It's just going to take a little bit more effort and water. That's the great thing about the water soluble film. Doesn't have to get as wet. I think you would be getting your item a little more moist if you use the mesh. And that's the reason I like the method I showed you here. You really, if you're dashing out the door to go to a shower, then, this isn't wet at all right now because I ironed the paper towel dry. So this is completely dry. The topping's completely gone. So that's my preferred method. Now that I know you can.
Carol Lombard wants to know what thread weight are you using?
Carol Lombard wants to know what thread weight I used on this text, and I actually used a 40 weight. My rule is if the lettering is 1/2 inch or larger, I use 40 weight. If it's smaller than 1/2 inch, I go with the 60 weight, and it really is a lot cleaner appearance in the lettering when you go with the 60 weight. I'll show you that in just a moment. In fact, I have an example right here that you might be able to see the difference. This lettering is just a little bit smaller than what's on this handkerchief. This handkerchief, the wedding one, is about 1/2 inch letters. So I used the 40 weight. When I went to do this scripture, the 23rd Psalm, the lettering was less than 1/2 inch. So I went with the 60 weight. And as you can see, it's very clear. It's a finer appearance than this one, if you can see that. So it's just not quite as bold, and I like it under 1/2 inch for sure. So this handkerchief, well, both of them were done with the sew and heat, and I simply tear off the excess off of the back, and I do use 2 layers. And so after I get the excess torn off, then I just iron it. And the great thing about this sewing heat is that, yeah.
The images aren't clear.
Oh, really?
Just chat a minute.
Okay.
See if I can do it. Just tell me.
Okay. So the great thing about sewing heat is that even if you don't get every single bit removed, it doesn't show on the other side at all because it's transparent. So that is the reason that I like the sewing heat. I also like it better than a water-soluble film because it is not requiring that the fabric get wet, which can, fabric doesn't look quite the same after it's gotten wet as it does when it's fresh and new. So I love doing the handkerchiefs, and look how wonderfully unpuckered they are. One of the other reasons that these don't pucker, even though it's a very sheer, you can see my fingers through it, it's a very sheer woven fabric, and the reason that these don't pucker, one reason is that I'm using a sharp point needle. And the sharp point needle is the correct needle for a woven fabric. We use ball points for knits. We use sharps for wovens. So there's the contrast between the 2 handkerchiefs. And as you can see, that's about 45 to 50,000 stitches in a sheer handkerchief, no puckering. Just be sure you hoop it all the way in the hoop, and you will have a very similar result. So that's the sewing heat.
So we're having some technical difficulties.
We're having some technical difficulties, I understand.
So I'm going to bring you back.
So Eileen's going to bring me back on the camera, on the other camera.
You can go back there now.
Oh,
It's better.
okay.
Try not to move it too much.
Move. The item, okay. So I'm going to show you now a silver bullet, I call it, and that is a woven material that is used for stabilizer on moisture wicking fabrics. And in our product line, it's called Stretchy Knit Stabilizer. And that is good for any type of multi-directional stretch knit. So that could include dance wear, it would include active wear, moisture wicking shirts like your husband or son might wear. And one thing I do see people doing that I want to share my technique, because I do see a lot of people obscuring the fabric. So let's say we're removing this stabilizer. You would never want to have your scissors where you can't see the back of the shirt or item, whatever it may be. So always peel it back. Some people hold it by the stabilizer, and you want to leave about 1/8 to 1/4 inch margin around your embroidery. And the reason is, if you get right up next to the embroidery, your embroidery can look sunken. It wants a little shelf or a little platform to stand up on. And I want to show you the beautiful clarity and outline on this embroidery. This is a moisture wicking shirt, a dry fit type shirt from Sanmar, and it has got a very heavy design or a very detailed design applied to it, no puckering, one layer of the stretchy knit stabilizer. And this is a woven. So it's the reason that I love it is because it gives you the properties of a woven. And I like to say you're really embroidering the stabilizer and the fabric's just getting in the way. So if you hoop it in securely with your knit, you're going to get a similar result. If your design is good on a stable fabric, it should be good on your knit if you're using a stable fabric like we're using here as your stabilizer. So you see, I've left my little platform all the way around my embroidery there. And that's a great looking piece of embroidery on a moisture wicking shirt. Now, I also want to show you something that is new. It's kind of a sneak peek almost, and that is Sticky Hoop. Sticky Hoop is a carrier for self-adhesive stabilizer like peel and stick. So you can see we've attached a cosmetic bag, slippers, the little embroider buddy there. So you can attach all kinds of things that would be challenging to hoop, and it comes in 6 by 10 inch size and a 5 by 7 inch size with pre-cut peel and stick for you to apply to the back of it there. So that is a great way to keep your hoops free from sticky. Now, I want to show you something I did a few years ago that departs from a standard stabilizer. You see this bulky knit. If I used a white stabilizer behind this knit, it would almost certainly show through this fabric, this knit. I used a matching green organza, polyester organza. This is an old trick used by manual monogram operators from the 50s. And it really works well today. So this is a very tight outlined design, and it worked beautifully on this open knit because it has this woven stabilizer behind it, the colored organza. So I like to keep half a yard of different colors of organza in my sewing room. Lastly, I want to show you on this design. You see, this is a kind of a full front of a sweatshirt. And when I do something larger than a 5x7 hoop, I like to use a traditional cutaway rather than something like a no-show or anything lighter. So in this design, I've used a traditional, regular cutaway, like a medium cutaway, and I get no puckering on my design, and it's going to hold up and give good service for the life of that sweatshirt. All of these kind of recommendations that I make are included on my embroiderer's compass. So on the compass, you're just going to point the pointer to the fabric you're going to embroider right up here. And in the window, it's going to show you my recommendation. In the middle window, it's going to show you my needle recommendation. And in the bottom window, it shows you any other comments I have about working with that particular fabric type. So that's a tool that has 27 different fabrics. It's two-sided, and you know, I even find myself referring to it if it's a fabric I haven't worked with in a while, because I did a lot of trial and error to develop this tool, and I think it's really pretty handy. And I think it's something small enough, compact, you can keep it right by your embroidery machine. Yeah. Oh, well, I do have your. Yeah, go ahead.
Come on over, because we want.
Yeah, okay. So where am I coming?
Just come right here.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
Okay, so we are sharing one mic.
Okay.
And I don't know why we have two, but they're not working. And the batteries, all of that is working. So I want Deborah to stand here and answer some of your questions, because I know there were quite a few. And so I'll just kind of scroll through.
You know, I remember one question that we got even before we started, Eileen,
Right.
and that was, can you use too much stabilizer? So I want to answer that question because that's a good one. And my basic rule is that I don't really want my stabilizer to be heavier than the fabric I'm applying it to. So that could have some exceptions, but honestly, I think with all the highly engineered stabilizers we have today, we can find a good stabilizer that won't be heavier than our fabric. So that's my guideline.
Right. And then Retha Renke, she says she's so interested because no matter what she does, her machine embroidery puckers.
Well, I would be curious to know what Retha's embroidering on mostly, but you know, there's multiple factors, but I don't want you to overlook that needle, Retha, because, you know, if you're doing wovens like quilting cottons or something like that, really that needle point and that blade size have a lot to do with whether you get puckers. And of course, your hooping technique can come into play if you're doing knits, because knits like to be married to that stabilizer in a hoop. So I would say those two things would be my top tips.
And then Ashley Jones made a great comment. She said on her fuse and stick, she uses it to prep her fabric when using her digital cutters.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I have done that too, Ashley. And, you know, it works great because it gives them that firmness that they want to be stable enough to not get dragged around by that cutter. It's a great tip.
Right. And then Misha Pennington wanted to know, can the mesh, the water-soluble mesh, be used as a topper?
It can be. It's just going to take a little more water to remove it. So we are going to get our item a little wetter to do it.
Right. And the beauty of the regular topper is you just tear it away.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. Well, there's lots of comments about the sound. So I'm trying to wade through them to get to your real stabilizer questions. And let's see. And Carol Lombard, she asked what thread weight. Deborah, I believe, already answered that, but go ahead. You can comment.
Yeah, my rule is if it's under 1/2 inch, I use 60 weight thread. And, you know, also, of course, I use fonts that are digitized for those small sizes. But the 40 weight for me works down to 1/2 inch.
Okay. And then Benita Harms asked, what was the product you used to iron away the topper on the toy?
It was the highly desirable and tough to find paper towel.
In your kitchen, right? Yeah.
Right. It may be tough to find right now, but no, seriously, you just use a moist paper towel. And the texture of that paper towel, the topping just clings to it, and you pull it away. You won't have any left. It's almost like a miracle.
Right. And then Ann Hendricks asked, she's had some other heat away products that leave hard pieces behind. I've experienced that too.
Yes. And, that's a reason why, some people like to use it as a topper, right? But I don't prefer it as a topper because those little hard balls you're talking about bury down in a pile. So unless I'm doing a waffle weave or something, I never use it as a topper. I tear away the vast majority of it and then iron it. And when you're ironing it off of a smooth, sheer fabric, you really don't get a problem with it, but it is still going to have some little balls that form,
bits, but
right?
They brush away.
Right.
So the idea is that you can brush them away. They don't stay hard in the embroidery itself.
That's right.
And then Carol, you ask, can this technique be used for a linen dish towel? I believe she's talking about the lettering on the handkerchief. So I would think so. Right?
It absolutely. It's all a matter of getting your density so that it doesn't look sawtoothed, because the only risk with the linen towel is that your satin stitches could look a little sawtoothed. So you just want to be sure you have your density and your underlay correct in your file that you're using to apply that.
And then Judy Warren wanted to say, just a reminder, what size needle when your fonts are under a half inch?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, Judy. I will go down to a 70 because the groove is what guides the thread to the eye. And you don't want that thread waving around in a too big of a groove. That's just common sense. So you don't want to use an 80, certainly. But I have also had decent results with a 75 if you just don't want to do without your needle threader, to get it through that smaller 70 needle. But, in good practice, we would use a size 70.
And then Joanne Banco, she always has the sweetest comments. She says hankies are as cherished today as they were many years ago.
It is true, and they are a wonderful gift. And I encourage you to give them a try because, what a sweet gift for a bride or for, your mother, for Mother's Day, things like that. It's a great cherished gift for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you for saying that, Joanne.
Okay, let's see. Can we show the handkerchief again? Okay, we will go back over there and show that again. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But let's see. And Deborah, Sharon Schroeder said, you really are an expert. Great advice.
You know what, Sharon Schroeder? The reason is because when I worked with multi-head machines, I got to make mistakes 12 at a time. And you remember when you're making those mistakes 12 at a time, it sticks with you.
That's funny because, we always, as a home embroiderer, I always say, well, you're going to make that mistake one time, but 12 times is a little different. It really sticks in your mind then. Right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And then Isabel Rian, she's our friend from France. She says, do you use steam with the paper towel?
No, you don't need to, Isabel, because the paper towel makes its own steam.
That's right. And then let's see, Mary, or thanks for your kind comment. And then Retha Ranke, do you wash your quilting cotton before embroidering on it?
Well, I'm not a quilter, so that would be a better question for Eileen, but I don't wash my handkerchiefs. I'll tell you that.
It depends, if there's time, okay, I might do it. But really, when I make a quilt, I like to keep the sizing that is already in the fabric during the piecing process because it makes it a nice stiffer, flatter fabric to sew and to get those exact seams. And I also like after it's quilted how it, kind of crunches up, right? It looks like it's weathered. So but I do real quilting with my embroidery machine. I don't do embroidery on cotton fabrics very frequently. That quilt, a table runner that you saw earlier with applique, that's as heavy as my embroidery gets on a quilt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't need to pre-wash. Let's see. And fun to add lace trims to the hankies too. Yeah, that's sweet. And then Barbara, she says she doesn't wash dish towels. Well, yeah.
No, and you know what? Interestingly, Barbara, I did a test on those waffle dish towels that they, make popcorn, when you wash them. And I did a test with an open design of a coffee cup and steam and everything. And I did it on a pre-washed waffle towel and an unwashed one, and then washed it. And you can't tell them apart.
Oh, that's
you
awesome.
can't tell them
That's
apart.
Great.
So
I love that. Yeah. So can you dig the hanky out over there and bring it
Sure.
up? Show them on this camera. Might be easier.
You bet. Dig it out is right.
And I'll read this to you. Well, they can't hear me. So.
Oh.
But Fred had a nice comment that you always have such great advice, Deborah.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? It does pay to use good quality stuff, whether it's your thread, your bobbins, your stabilizer. I don't spend my time unless I'm using the best.
Carol DeGarris, she has, and I know the answer to this, but
go ahead. Okay.
Sorry if you've already answered this, but when I use water soluble stabilizer, I have a hard time rinsing it away completely unless she puts it in the washing machine.
Yeah. Well, there's two tips I gave Carol. One was to put a 1 part fabric softener with 12 parts water and use that in your spray bottle, but test it first on your fabric because some fabrics are sensitive and will spot with fabric softener. And that eats it up, kind of like if you've ever removed wallpaper and you use fabric softener in your mixture to do that, because it eats up glue. And just think of your water soluble like a sheet of dried glue, right? But the other tip I gave, which is my absolute favorite, and we even demonstrated it, and it worked pretty well. You just tear away the big pieces always, lay a moist paper towel on top of the item, and iron that paper towel dry. When you lift it away, all of the topping comes away with it, even in those tiniest openings. It's the best tip I've ever found.
And the hotter the water, the better.
You bet. It does help. It does help.
Absolutely. Okay, so show them that hanky. Let's maybe see if we can get it up a little closer to. There we go. Isn't that beautiful?
And that's very small. That's smaller than 1/2-inch letters. And if you talk about the lowercase, they're much smaller. Yeah. And a sharp needle and an appropriate font is really the key. 2 layers of sew and heat. And that's something I think anybody would really be proud to give. This one doesn't have as dark a thread, but that's a little bit larger lettering, but pretty much the same result. And that's a nice wedding hanky with the endearment, and the signature at the bottom with the date.
So Mary Orr, this is a stumper, I think. Can you use the fabric softener mixture if you have friction pens on the item?
I don't know, but I've not had the best experiences with the friction pens, so I just don't use them. So it's not a good question for me.
Yes, and I've had mixed results. Test. Always test, right?
Right.
I mean, they're great for some applications, but I use a lot of custom printed fabric, and they don't work so well with that fabric for sure.
It's going to depend on your fabric, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so should we show the dime door? Do you think we have any more questions? Because it's almost time. Right? We have a drum roll. We can do a drum roll, but I'm actually petrified to try to share the screen. So let's try. Okay, let's see. All right, we're going to share the screen. And Joanne Banco says it's always best to test, and she's not kidding. So let's see if we can make this happen. There we go. And
I'll get the other door.
Now, of course, we have oh, that's so scary. What do they see? Go over and see what they see. Okay.
Maybe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, now they do.
Okay. Okay, so we do, of course, have a special on all stabilizers. Yeah, we do have a special on all stabilizers this week at dzgns.com, and there's free shipping. And use that promo code that you see there on the screen. But I will go ahead and I will do my drum roll and hope that when I change this slide, the June door will really appear. So let's see. Oh, there we go. Isn't it cute? I did two versions. I did a dark and a light, and it's a church door in recognition of all those brides that had maybe hoped to be married in June, this June 2020, or actually were. And of course, many people celebrate wedding anniversaries in June because it is the most popular month to get married in America. So I thought maybe you could find some fun enhancements to this. And Deborah has one that she's going to show towards the end that she thought of to add. So we're going to start like we normally do, making our tabs, right? Get that out of the way. No change there. And then you're going to hoop a piece and stitch stabilizer or a medium cutaway, and you'll lay your batting in the hoop. And I used my multi-needle machine this month, but of course it's still a 6x10 design, so it works on single needle and multi-needle machines. And then I added my batting, trimmed it away, and then added the church fabric itself. The next color stitches the detail on the building, and then the archway, the stonework around the door. And over that opening, I added my applique fabric and stitched the details on that and the hardware. And then trimmed away that excess fabric. And the next step adds the concrete, the steps, the walkway into the church. And of course, we're going to place that right sides together, extending the edge of the fabric below the bottom of the actual church door so that you can catch it in the seam. And once that seam is stitched, we then pull down that fabric and stitch the next color, which is the stone walkway. And it outlines the placement guide, or outlines the placement guide for the green grass on the left-hand side. And I always do the grass in two different colors so that the foot doesn't, travel back and forth and maybe get caught on the applique fabric. So you'll stitch that tack down and then trim it away and stitch the satin edging on the left-hand side. And also then the next steps, of course, are to repeat those steps for the grass on the right. And then it's time to do the beautiful arch, that trellis that goes all the way over the door. It has two pots on the bottom. It's going to start with the brown and then the light green, the darker green leaves, and then the flowers are all one color. Next, you'll add your hanging tabs that you had already prepared and at the top, and you'll stitch them down. Cover the whole piece of work with the backing fabric. It needs to be bigger than 6x10. I usually do 7x11. And the last color will stitch that around, leaving an opening for turning, and then you'll turn it right side out. And there you have your version. So you can see that I used two different, I made two different ones. I kind of struggled with, I like the lighter one for summertime, but it's hard to get flowers to pop off of that unless you use a very bright colored flower. And that was not my intention. So I'm hoping that you all saw that. Oh, you did. Good. Okay. Because I was working in the dark there. So many nice comments. The promo code for free shipping is there. Wonderful. And I can put that up on the screen for, well, maybe I can't. No, here we go. All right, there we go. And so next month is all about hoops, Deborah. All about hoops. I know. Great. Isn't that fun? Yep. And we're really excited to do that. And I promise that we will have a little bit more success next week. We do test all the time, over and over and over again. I can't tell you how much testing goes on here, but sometimes you just can't, do enough. And I wish I could find Mary Orr's comment to take that off the screen, but I think a lot of you really like the June door, and so that's going to be up on our website any minute now. Our team in the background is making that happen, and of course you'll find it in multi-formats. There'll be a PDF of the instructions and the images so that you can download it. And Deborah, go get your sample. Oh, it's right here. Look. Okay, how do we do that? Yeah. Look. Yeah, so we wanted to add it's kind of popular right now to have a mimic a veil, a bridal veil, and add it to the door of either the church or the home that's hosting a bridal shower. So we kind of worked with a little bit of tulle and just gathered that up and placed it underneath the wreath from my Lace Charms collection, which I just stitched in all light green and white little buds and the white bow. So I'm sure you're going to have lots of different ideas of what you'll add to your door. So I can't wait to see them next week, right? So remember, when you stitch your door and you place it on, and you post it on Facebook, use hashtag Dime Door, and then we can gather them and include them in our broadcast next week, which will be at 1:00 next Thursday. So thank you all for joining us. And we had a great time and we really appreciate your patience. Come on in here and say goodbye. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you here next week. Bye.
Bye.